The peace talks are underway again at the United Nations. Mrs. Thatcher says it may be the last chance we've gone as far as we can go. The common market sanctions just 4 hours to the deadline and there's still no agreement. Churchmen fly to Rome in a bid to save the Pope's visit.
And here at the Ministry of Defence, it's been revealed that 2 British helicopters crash-landed on South Georgia while they were trying to land special forces there 3 days before the island was repossessed. There were no casualties.
Good evening. At the United Nations, the peace talks are underway again, but there's also a lot of talk tonight about how much longer before the order is given to reoccupy the Falklands. Mrs. Thatcher said this may be the last chance for a peaceful settlement, and we should know before the end of the week whether or not it will succeed. Mr. Foote has demanded that if it does come to a decision on full-scale military operations, the House of Commons as a whole must make that decision. The Secretary-General of the United Nations has said we're in the final stages of the exercise, and Britain's representative there will be sending back a report on the negotiations later tonight for a cabinet meeting in the morning. A special envoy from Argentina is on his way to New York to give his government's response to the UN peace plan. In an interview with Independent Radio News, Mrs. Thatcher talked of the difficulties of negotiating with the Argentine junta.
You don't know who you're dealing with. Is it Mr. Ross? Is it Mr. Costa Mendes? He has to refer to Galtieri. Mr. Galtieri has to refer to the others in the junta. They have to refer to the generals. Well, we've been at this for 6 weeks, and we're having one last go to see if we can get a peaceful settlement. My guess is that we shall know this week whether we're going to get a peaceful settlement or not. These are the 6th set of proposals. You would think that if the Argentines wanted a peaceful settlement, they'd have taken more steps than they have towards one. The question is, do they want one or not? And that's what we're trying to find out.
Britain's ambassador, Sir Anthony Parsons, arriving back in New York, lost little time getting back to negotiation, pausing only to emphasize that the talks must have a limited life.
I don't think anybody considered on any side that this round of negotiations can go on indefinitely.
At the UN, he went in without comment to convey Britain's position to the Secretary-General. The UN Secretary-General, Pérez de Cuellar, believes that the next 2 days will be decisive. Admittedly, he said that more than once before, but clearly the diplomats must now move with speed. The 2 men met for over an hour. The fact that the Falklands has yet to become an issue between the great powers is the best hope Pérez de Cuellar has of getting agreement. Against that, the Secretary-General, like the Pope, has no divisions at his disposal and only moral authority to influence the 2 parties. It may not be enough. Unusually for him, Sir Anthony read a statement when he emerged.
We had a detailed discussion lasting some 65 minutes. As you may or may not appreciate, I cannot tell you what we discussed. But I would emphasize that we are still engaged in very serious, determined and urgent efforts to achieve a negotiated settlement. Thank you very much.
Sir Anthony's presentation of Britain's position is now to be conveyed to the Argentine envoy Enrique Ross, who is due to be with the Secretary-General about now.
The Foreign Office are doing little to discourage speculation that Sir Anthony has sped back to New York with orders from Mrs. Thatcher to bring the UN mediation effort to a head by midweek, one way or the other. For public consumption, he may have been non-committal, but Sir Anthony told Mrs. Thatcher during their 5-hour meeting at the weekend that he could find no evidence that Argentina was prepared to enter into serious negotiations based on Britain's minimum requirements, withdrawal of Argentine personnel from the Falklands, and open talks with no prejudged conclusion of the island's future. Sir Anthony has been told to send back overnight a report on the results of his meeting with Secretary-General de Cuellar, so it can be considered when a special meeting of the Cabinet discusses the Falklands at number 10 in the morning. Mrs. Thatcher herself has been doing some tough talking again. It's widely accepted in Whitehall, certainly among civil servants anyway, that be it peace or war over the Falklands, the ultimate result will be the same, eventual Argentine sovereignty over the islands. The Prime Minister, though, seems to have different ideas if this exchange with her interviewer on Independent Radio tonight is anything to go by.
Eventually we were working towards handing over the sovereignty of the place anyway.
I beg your pardon? Did you really say that eventually Britain would leave these people to be under the heel of a junta if they did not wish it? Those were words I never thought to hear. We went to defend them. That's what we've gone for. We've gone to get the Argentines off the island. And I hope no one will ever say that British subjects can't look to us to protect them.
The politicians are talking about the principle that aggression doesn't pay. The civil servants are being more practical. Their argument is that they wanted to get rid of the Falklands problem before this crisis, but were prevented by politicians. There's no way, they say, that in the long term we can hang on to the Falklands, and they can never return to their previous status. But that's an argument that will be fought out in the corridors of power once this present crisis is over.
Britain is still having trouble tonight in getting the EEC to renew trade sanctions against Argentina. The meeting of Common Market foreign ministers, which began last night, adjourned again after only 2 hours, in the face of strong objections from Italy to the British proposals. The 10 ministers, including Mr Pym, will be getting together again shortly to try to hammer out a compromise. Kate Adie, who's in Luxembourg, has been following the talks.
After a string of emergency meetings and with only 4 hours to the sanction deadlines, British hopes of a unanimous decision from the Common Market are in danger of being flattened by the Italians. A spokesman for their foreign minister, Signor Colombo, said a short while ago that his government could fall if he endorsed the renewal. There's been parliamentary unease in Rome for some time now, especially after the sinking of the Belgrano, and it's resulted in Britain failing to obtain easily what she most needed, undivided support from her European allies. The Italian minister and the Irish are now at this moment in contact with their capitals. A final decision has not yet been taken. It may still be possible in talks later this evening to produce a compromise, with some countries making individual gestures to back Britain, or perhaps a majority decision still in favour of sanctions. But this is far short of what Mr Pym wanted. The ministers are having dinner now and are returning to see if they can still reach a satisfactory solution. Mr Pym's comment for the moment is, "We do not wholly despair."
One of Britain's strongest supporters in Europe over the Falklands issue has been France's President Mitterrand. He's understood to have assured Mrs Thatcher of continued French backing when he visited number 10 for a working lunch today. The Falklands featured prominently at the 2.5-hour meeting, which was originally arranged to discuss next month's economic summit at Versailles. The opposition leader, Mr Michael Foot, has tonight written to Mrs Thatcher asking for an undertaking on her part that there would be no escalation of the conflict for up to 48 hours if present negotiations come to an end. And he says the Commons as a whole, not the inner cabinet or what he calls some raucous group of conservative backbenchers, must make the decision about launching full-scale military action. Mr Foot says it would be intolerable if the move were made from the diplomatic field to full-scale military operations without the House having the chance to judge the nature of the diplomatic settlement available. He adds, indeed, such a development would be even more intolerable if the eventual proposed settlements were to be presented to both parties as a reasonable fulfilment of Resolution 502 by the UN Secretary-General. Mr Foot says the Labour Party have insisted from the start on UN involvement and would not in any circumstances depart from that insistence. It was indispensable in Britain's own interest. Before any major escalation, the Labour Party would want to debate the terms available, and he was asking for an absolute assurance of the opportunity to do so. Tonight, Downing Street said the letter was being considered. It's not yet known whether a reply will be made tonight or tomorrow. The Ministry of Defence revealed tonight that 2 Royal Navy helicopters crash-landed in a blizzard on South Georgia 3 days before British forces recaptured the island. The ministry said there were no casualties, and no announcement has been made until now for what are called operational reasons. For more details, here's Nicholas Witchell in Whitehall.
The Defence Ministry has kept the crash landing of the 2 helicopters secret for more than 3 weeks. Details have only now emerged because a crewman on one of the vessels in the South Georgia operation has written home and told his family what happened. So tonight, the ministry confirmed that 3 days before Britain recaptured South Georgia, 2 naval helicopters crash-landed on the island during a fierce blizzard. I understand that at the time they were attempting to land special forces on the island. All the men got out of the helicopters safely and were recovered by another helicopter without any casualties. The incident confirms what's all along been suspected, that British forces were active on the island some days before the main assault and recapture of South Georgia. On events around the Falklands today, our special correspondent with the task force, Brian Hanrahan, says there have been no reported incidents, although overnight there was another naval bombardment. We've just received this dispatch from Brian Hanrahan aboard HMS Hermes.
The overnight shelling followed the pattern of previous days. A destroyer moved in under cover of darkness to drop more shells near Port Stanley. A risky operation, manoeuvring in waters where any minefields laid by Argentina are likely to be. From their position close to the coast, the crew reported that the shelling had started a fire, but they couldn't tell what had been hit. Since then, it's been a quiet but tense day for the task force. This is Argentina's Navy Day, and no doubt would be regarded by their admirals as a good moment to strike at the British fleet. But although the ships braced for attack, there was little that could be done to increase the state of readiness that is constantly maintained. The Sea Harriers kept up their guard, but weren't challenged. The Harriers are also flying a steady series of photo reconnaissance missions over the islands. As the political options run out and the decision about whether to invade comes nearer, the need to know the location of all Argentine troops and their supply dumps becomes of paramount importance. Brian Hanrahan, BBC, aboard HMS Hermes.
General Galtieri's junta have been marking Navy Day by saying that British policy is two-faced and calling for courage from all Argentina's armed forces. It's the anniversary of the time when their navy under a British admiral gave Argentina its freedom from Spain. But as Christopher Morris reports, there's no fondness now towards Britain. The talk is all of attack.
The Navy played a crucial role in seizing the islands during last month's invasion, and the Commander-in-Chief, Admiral Jorge Anaya, has been the most hawkish member of the Argentine military junta during the negotiations since for a peaceful solution. This was an occasion not so much for military pomp and ceremony, but to show the world that the Argentine Navy is determined to fight on. An important occasion too for the Navy chiefs to hear the Admiral's advice and orders to be calm, confident and courageous. Admiral Anaya exhorted the Navy to renew efforts to be victorious in what he called